Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Fumble. I'm your host, Samaria Terry, and today we've got a true grit playmaker joining us. He's a former NFL safety who's been a force on the field for the Steelers, the Giants, and the Bears, but these days he's making just as big of an impact off the field in health and wellness space. Y'all give it up and show some love for the man, the myth, the legend, Ryan Mundy. What's up, cousin? Thank you so much for coming on with us.
What's going on? I appreciate that intro. The man, the myth, the legend is funny because that's what my college teammates used to say to me. And I haven't heard that in about 20 years. So it definitely gave me a little bit of a chuckle, but I'm feeling well today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Today we're filming this. It's October 10th. It is World Mental Health Day. Ryan, what does today mean to you?
It's a very important day for us to take a moment and acknowledge the importance of mental health and well-being in each and every one of our lives, right? Like we all have individual and unique journeys, and the reality is no one knows the entirety of our full story, the things that we've been through, the traumas that we've experienced, the victories that we've accomplished, so on and so forth. And today I look at it as a celebration and an opportunity to raise awareness and just, continue to communicate the importance of like overall mental well-being, resilience, community. All these things really kind of show up on World Mental Health Day, but it really bubbles back up to an opportunity for us to just come together, take a moment, take a pause, and really, highlight the importance of our collective mental health, but also celebrate and acknowledge our individual efforts as we move forward to just continue to be healthy from a mental standpoint.
Yeah, and mental health is something that you tackle every day you created this platform called Alchemy Health. Kind of take us back. What went into not only just going out and talking about mental health, but creating a platform to help other people with it as well?
Yeah, it really stemmed from my experience as an athlete. As you mentioned, I had quite a lengthy career in the NFL, 8 years to be specific, but I played 24 years in total of football. And so upon retirement at the age of 31, I found myself in a very unfamiliar space. And that space was filled with anxiety, thinking about the future and what I was going to do because I was no longer playing football. The space was occupied with depression because I missed football and I could no longer do the thing that I had been doing for 24 years and that I had built my life around. And I guess to kind of connect those two, just like who am I, and identity issues, right? Really trying to figure myself out for this next chapter and phase of my life. And the point in time was 2016. And so like the conversation around mental health is not nearly what it is today. And World Mental Health Day probably wasn't, I know it wasn't on my radar in 2016, but I knew I needed help outside of myself. And so I went out into, quote, the marketplace to try to find a therapist, right? And that was a really, really tough experience for me. Finding someone that I connected with, finding someone who saw behind the mask, who saw behind all the glitz and glam of the NFL, so on and so forth, and really just resonated with me as Ryan Mundy, the black man, the black boy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And that experience was pretty eye-opening because it wasn't because I didn't have resources. I was just coming out of the NFL, so I had money and I had all the things that one would think you would need to, A, have a happy life, right? But then B, if you need help and support, you could go out and get that pretty easily. And neither one of those was the case for me. And also during this time, my family was going through a laundry list of chronic conditions, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart attack, stroke, etc. And so I was seeing all these chronic conditions show up in my family, and I was dealing with my own personal issues. And I just asked one really simple question. I said, like, who's focused on the trajectory of Black health in this country? And the answer really came back that there were very few people who are principally focused on it. And so that really represented an opportunity for somebody to step up to the plate and do just that. And so really, that's like the genesis story of Alchemy. And so in 2020, I decided to step up to the plate and create Alchemy with the principal focus on creating generational health for the Black community.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for that because that is huge. We need that. I lived in Nashville for 2 years, and I recently did a story with Kevin Dyson. I don't know if you remember that Titans team that went to the Super Bowl, but they came up just a yard short. That was Dyson that came up just a yard short on the tackle against St. Louis. And he said for years, no one ever asked him, how did he cope with that? People just asked him, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
You didn't get that 1 yard to tie up the game to go to overtime. You were short. What were you thinking? He said it was a kid, because now he's a principal. He said it was a kid that asked him, how did you cope with that, man? And he told me like he lashed out at people and he felt like he just needed to work extra hard because he was actually drafted higher than Randy Moss, which is crazy to think about. But I wanted to ask you, like, what would you say were some of your tough moments while you were playing? And maybe how did people even react to that? And did they react to that in the way that they probably should have?
Yeah, I immediately think back to, bad plays are a part of the game, or plays where you come up short are definitely a part of the game. And if you play long enough and if you play hard enough, you will absolutely have your fair share of them. And so I always found myself when I had a bad play, relatively bouncing back quickly because in football, it's all about this concept of play the next play, and being present and being in the moment. And if you're too far in the past or too far in the future and you got a world-class athlete standing in front of you, you're going to get beat and you're not going to be able to execute your roles and responsibilities for that particular play. And so from a performance standpoint, I always was able to navigate that. I would say not easily, but I had a good grasp on that. However, the challenging part for me when I look back on my career was dealing with injuries. I think that's a big part of the game, and particularly in football. And I didn't have a lot of injuries while I was a player, but there are two very distinct points in time where I had some pretty significant injuries that changed the trajectory of my career. The first was when I was in college at Michigan. I had a pretty serious neck injury that caused me to sit out my entire junior season, and really that was a trying time because the expectations were really high, and I felt like I was not only letting myself down, but I was letting my teammates down. And then also at the end of my career, when I was 30 years old, I had back surgery, and I ended up on season-ending injured reserve for the Chicago Bears. I never played it down during that 2015 season, and subsequently, I never came back from football. I never came back to play football. And that was a really, really tough time period for me. And I think the catalyst that kind of sparked my spiral into depression and anxiety, because the year before in 2014, I came off a personal best. Like I had 100 plus tackles, 4 interceptions, defensive touchdown. I was doing really, really well. And I finally felt like I had my opportunity and found my groove. However, I got hurt. And there were some other things that happened within the organization, coaches changes, so on and so forth. But putting all that into a bucket just kind of sent me into a negative spiral. And ultimately, after that season, in the offseason of 2015, I just said, I'm done with football. And looking back, it is what it is. Would I change that decision? Maybe. But I just wasn't in that headspace to get myself together at the age of 30. I'm like, man, my back hurts. I'm older now. It was just really, really hard for me to kind of get myself together and get in the right mindset to recover from that injury.
Okay, so let's kind of pivot a little bit to athletes today. Social media is so huge. We've talked a lot on this platform about Angel Reese and how she's had to take a step away. Even Bronny James, just yesterday we were talking about him and maybe some of the pressures that he's feeling having to play alongside his father. Could you imagine what young athletes are going through right now with the growth of social media the way that it is?
Yeah, I think it's particularly challenging and tough. I reflect back to when I was the age of an Angel Reese or a Bronny James. Social media it was around, but it's not what it is today. And it's very, very different. There is some negative to it, but there's also just a huge opportunity, and it's a platform now. And you see a lot of players building their brand, thinking about life beyond sports. And so, albeit there are some potential negative aspects as it relates to social and the opportunities that come with it, it's also just a great platform and an opportunity for you to brand yourself and quote be more than an athlete and set yourself up. So where I'm going with that is if you embrace it and kind of take it as it is and say like, look, this is just how the world works right now. And if I'm looking to really kind of leverage myself and my personal brand to not only for not immediate impact, but also long-term impact, then that's I think a great opportunity. And so like basically having the right mindset and approach and how to use the tool that is social media and treat it like a tool and not treat it as if that is the end all be all and that's where you find your self-worth and your validation, etc. Don't use it for that. Use it for promotional purposes. Use it for business purposes. Don't use it to affirm yourself. Don't use it to listen to the noise. It's all about that perspective and how you use it. But just zooming back out again, I think just young athletes, sometimes it's hard for them to conceptualize that or wrap their brains around that. So it's important to have the right folks that can shape that perspective for you. But again, when you talk about Bronny James, I think the bigger looming thing is with him, like he's playing with the greatest basketball player of all time.
Yes.
And that's a tall task in and of itself. But
yeah,
you just got to take it one day at a time. And I think, that's really been my core life principle is don't get too far ahead of yourself. That little voice in your head can start to paint a picture, and I call them like mental movies. And then you start watching and replaying all these negative scenarios that aren't necessarily, they're not real and they're not happening right now. And so finding yourself, being present, and just taking it one day at a time and leveraging the tools like social media, NIL for your good, and treating them as tools, I think they're a great opportunity.
And how much does your platform in Alchemy Health really help with that?
Yeah, for sure. So like we offer a content library that features close to 400 plus workshop videos led by clinical professionals that help break down these complex topics and make them very digestible and palatable. But then also too, we provide self-care tools that show up in the form of like meditations, breathwork exercises, etc. We even have some yoga on our platform. So, just providing space and resources for both young athletes, young people, middle-aged, millennials, older folks, so on and so forth. Just making sure that the tools are readily and available and accessible for our community. That's how we've been showing up over the last several years. And moving forward, we're getting ready to connect connect people to therapists on our platform.
All right, let's talk a little football.
Cool.
So you just said that you had your best season in Chicago. You still live there. What do you make of the new look of the Bears under Caleb Williams?
I'm excited. Caleb has a lot of talent, and I think he's proven that over the last several years. But what's happening right now, and I think this is just my opinion, right? But we're 5 games into the season, high expectations. And particularly here in Chicago, the Bears fans have been waiting for this moment since 1985. And fun fact, I was born in 1985. That's damn near 40 years ago. It's been a very, very long time where the Bears fans truly feel like they have hope and promise for the future. And, you talk about this new stadium that's about to show up, hopefully in downtown. So there's a lot of buzz and energy within the organization. Got a new president, Kevin Warren, new general manager, Ryan. So like the pieces are here. And so basically now that the quarterback is in place, that was like the last domino. And everybody's like, oh, it should happen right now. No, that's not how it works. We're 5 games into the season. It takes time to translate that college game to the NFL and just really build that team chemistry, right? Get everybody on the same page. An analogy that I use is that Peyton Manning's rookie season, he had damn near 30 interceptions. And I would say his career turned out okay. And so the thing to keep in mind here is it's a marathon, not a sprint. You do want to have flashes of like, okay, we're making progress. And I think the Bears are showing that and they're finding their rhythm as we get moving into the season. But the back half of their schedule is pretty tough, filled with division opponents. So we'll see. But again, keeping in mind, this is the first of many years. And so like, we just have to let this play out over a longer period of time.
Yeah. Okay. You're from Pennsylvania, drafted to your hometown team. They have a bit of a quarterback battle going on right now. Have you been following that? What do you make of this?
Are you calling it a battle?
Oh, I guess it depends on who you ask, right?
Well, I mean, it the decision was made before the season. Russell Wilson is our starter. And then I don't know what happened, but now Russell Wilson is injured and he hasn't played it down in 5 games. And so like the tide has kind of turned relatively quickly, and Justin got off to a really hot start. The Steelers started out 3-0. Unfortunately, they've lost their last 2 games, both very winnable games. What's happening now, and particularly at the quarterback situation, I think was inevitable because Justin he's young. He gives you hope for the future, etc. Russell, great guy, great career, but he's on the back end, right? So like from a team building and organizational development perspective, you look at it and say like, how am I going to build my team here? I have a young quarterback, pedigree, et cetera, that we could potentially build around for the next 10 years, or we have a legacy guy that we might get 1 or 2 good years out of. But they have a lot of other holes that they need to fill. And so I think from the quarterback position, I feel good about that. But honestly, they need more help. They need to get him more help. They need to get him wide receivers. I like the running back. Najee Harris is okay. They need more offensive line play, better offensive line play. So plugging those holes, I think, should position them better. But from a quarterback perspective, I like Justin a lot.
Have you been following the WNBA?
Relatively, yes.
Okay, because I was going to ask you, who do you think is going to win it all?
It's the Lynx and the Liberty, right?
Yes.
Okay. See? Relatively.
See, you
I know what's going on. I definitely know what's going on. I think New York has a really strong team, right? Yeah. Yeah, I've caught some highlights and clips of them, so I'm going to go with New York.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Liberty is going to win it all too. But Ryan, thank you so much for coming through, sharing your journey from the gridiron to the wellness world. And be sure to check out what he's building with Alchemy Health and how he's helping to empower communities with mental health support. And don't forget to drop a comment and let us know who you would like to see next time on The Fumble. Ryan, again, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you so much for having me.